In week 11, we are going to talk about capacity management, which enables any organization to manage demand according to business priorities. So, if we can make sure that certain critical processes always have enough capacity to run efficiently and effectively, we're going to discuss that how the operation management performance can be more aligned to the organization's strategic objective if the key component of capacity is taken in consideration, how it has to be managed, aligned to the organization's strategic objective. Because good capacity management always provides businesses with the ability to make more informed decision about their certain future plans, their expansion, investment, or they have any other set of objective to achieve in midterm and long term. However, when we say capacity management, it is important for us to know what exactly we mean by capacity. So we ask this question from ourselves and we say what capacity is exactly. We know capacity is the maximum level of output that a company or any business organization can sustain to make a product or provide a service to as per the demand to their customer. So capacity is in the static physical sense means the scale of an operation. This also means that capacity may not necessarily reflect the operations processing capability. Rather, we have to see it must incorporate time dimension appropriate to the use of asset. For example, this is very important that we understand that when we say how many liter, how many kilometer, for example, but it can only be more give us a clear sense if we say with the time frame. Let's say we say 24,000 liter per day is produced. So that is the total capacity of an particular production that can do it. So 10,000 calls per day can be managed. That is the call center or any service center maximum capacity. Or we have 57 patients per session to be tackled, or they can be provided the services or consultation. So we have to see that capacity is basically defined as the ability to achieve, store, or produce. If any organization want to know what is the capacity or the ability of a given system to produce output within specific time period, that is the actual capacity that the organizations has the resources in place to perform. In operation management, capacity is basically referred as an amount of the input resources available to produce relative output over a period of time. So when we understand the capacity, the next question is what is then capacity management? So we look to the capacity management in this slide and we say capacity management refers to the act of ensuring a business maximizes its potential activities and production output at all time under all conditions. It is basically the capability of any business to measure how much companies can achieve or the business can produce or sell within a given time period. So capacity management refers to the actions of ensuring a business maximizes its potential activities and output at all time and under all condition to ultimately achieve maximum productivity or its profit. However, it is if, for example, every production line has a constraint, there's a bottleneck, then focusing on improvement, that the efforts on certain constraint is the achieving the fastest, most effective path to increase the capacity and improve capability is basically capacity management. So capacity management in operation management context is basically the capacity of manufacturing or servitization unit that can be expressed in number of units of output in a particular time interval. In some situation, measuring capacity is more complicated when the manufacturing, they have a multiple product manufactured. In such situation, capacity is expressed sometimes as a number of hours for the resources to be utilized. So for example, a coal center can field 7,000 coal per, let's say, a week or 7 days. A cafe can brew 800 cups of a coffee per day. An automobile production line can assemble, let's say, 300 cars in 10 days time. So it depends how we do the measurement for capacity in the time interval is more important. So what is the objective of capacity management, the purpose of capacity management? It is basically the process to ensure that the capacity of any manufacturing or servitization within the infrastructure or the available resources to achieve cost effective time manner certain set objective of the organization. So the objective of capacity management is basically to provide an appropriate amount of capacity at any point in time. The appropriateness of capacity planning in any part of the operation can be judged by its effect on cost, revenue, working capital, as well as service level. So capacity management basically refers to the act of ensuring a business can maximize its potential activities and production output at all time under all condition. So this is very important to understand that the capacity of a business management basically measures how much companies can achieve or produce or sell within a given time frame or time period. So we have to see the capacity management objective by measuring aggregate capacity and demand, identifying the alternative capacity plans, and then choosing the most appropriate capacity plan. That means capacity management is important for a number of reasons. For example, ensuring the business for its capability and to providing services or production or product to its customer to meet their need and expectation by delivering the expected end user performance across all its business critical customer facing application. So it also ensures that the applications or the product or the services can meet as per the desired performance from the customer or end users point of view. And that's also important that if we take the example that the business capacity for services and resources, they have to be managed accordingly. So we take the aggregate against time, and we have a baseline as a capacity to estimate for a certain period of time, and then with the fluctuation in demand, whatever the resources we have in place, we need to make the best possible estimate that how much capacity need to be there to meet the demand, even if it's fluctuating between peak and off-peak times. So we have to see whatever is the forecast demand and then the estimation how we can meet the balance between the aggregate between the two important lines as shown in this in the graphical illustration. So for example, we take an example for the nature of aggregate capacity. We call it aggregate capacity management, ACM, which is the process of planning and managing the overall capacity of an organization resources. So we are basically trying to understand that how organizations can provide the or make available the input to meet the demand for giving output to the end user. Let's take the operation of number of organization. Here we take the sector of, let's say, manufacturing, the plant, the manufacturing, let's say, TV sets. We take the example of hospital as a service provider, take the example of university, a retail store, and then let's say for entertainment, we take example of cinema. Now we have to see the input measure of capacity in these 5 chosen operation of organization for their operation. So the input measure of capacity for TV manufacturing plant, we say machine hours available for certain production, for example, beds available for number of patients in the hospital, number of students can be facilitated in the university, and number of, let's say, the sales floor area that can help to sell certain products for display and customer demand in retail store, and number of seats available for people to attend or watch for certain movie in cinema. So we can see here the output of the capacity from the input measure of capacity, and the output measure of capacity is basically we have to see unit produced in the TV manufacturing plant per week, and then number of patients treated per week in the hospital as the output measure of capacity, and number of students graduated in a year in the university will be the output measure of capacity, and the items sold per day will be the measuring capacity for the output of the retail store, and then tickets sold and the seats, for example, filled in any cinema, the tickets they have sold per week. So these are just the measuring yard that how you can measure the output of capacity from whatever is available as input resources. So basically the idea is we make the best use of our resources and make the organization more profitable, and we are not under resourced or we are not over resourced. So that's the important point for capacity, to meet the demand and have the resources available as a very appropriate baseline with the fluctuation of demand with 10-20% more or less to ensure that we have the best use of resources in any particular organization. So the nature of aggregate capacity here, we take the aggregate, and that is again very important. Aggregate, we use ACM as aggregate capacity management, which is the process of planning and managing overall capacity of any organization resources. Aggregate capacity management aims to balance capacity and demand in a cost-effective manner. It is generally medium term in nature, as opposed to day-to-day or week-to-week capacity management. So we take the aggregate as the average. So we just do the demand forecast for relevant period. We do evaluation of all the available means to make capacity planning, like subcontracting or outsourcing or offshoring, for example. We take the example here as the hotel, how they do their aggregate capacity, for example, measuring the room per night they have to sell. So they ignore how many people will be in each room, but the aggregate is basically number of room per night, irrespective how many guests will stay in each room. And then we take the example of manufacturing. So hotel is a servitization. If you take the example of manufacturing, we take the example of aluminum producing company, the plant. So we measure the tons of aluminum used per month or utilized for production. So we ignore the type of alloy, gauge, or other badge variation product is produced from the total input capacity. So we measure through the input that how much is the utilization to take the aggregate from within the aluminum production plant. So we look to the fluctuation in the demand as well as the capacity we have in place. So the seasonality, and we say the capacity management, we know many organization capacity planning and control is concerned largely with coping with the demand or fluctuation with the change in season. Some are peak seasons in organizations, some are very off-peak. So with seasonal demand fluctuation, how we manage and control the capacity. Almost all product and services have some demand season fluctuation. Some have the supply seasonality, usually where the input are seasonal. For example, agricultural product in different season, and they are produce high in volume, and another season they are very low in volume. In processing the vegetable, for example, for the peak season and then off-peak season, what are the alternative possible processes to be involved in the operation to predict and forecast the demand for future, and then meet the demand with the variation because of the weather or the season, or sometimes even change in economic conditions. That is important to understand for seasonality and capacity management. So the causes of seasonality, we take the example of number of organization. In this graphical illustration, in this slide, which show us and give us rather an example of seasonality, and we can see that the production, we have to look into different organization and what factors affecting their demand and fluctuation, from construction material to organization with beverages, food. For example, take the example of ice cream, how it's fluctuating in summer and winter. Clothing, for example, let's say take example of the overcoat or a different kind of shoes. Gardening can be an example for different season fluctuation. Firework, travel services, holidays, taxation, doctor, patient, for example, sports services, education. You just name any organization and you will see the number of factors affecting their fluctuation. It can be because of the festive season, or because of the religious point of view, or social, cultural. And we know these factors are going to be climate, weather, festive season, behavioral, cultural, political, even financial and social are the key forces which are the causes of seasonality, and it has impact on the fluctuation in demand, as well as we have to ensure the capacity is available to meet the demand with the variation in seasonality. So demand fluctuates, and you can see in this graphical illustration there's example of 4 different organizations because of its nature. You can see service organization. Here you can see hotel, and the rooms they can sell per night. How many rooms in that hotel? Let's say hotel has a 200 rooms. How many rooms are sold per night? So it fluctuates again month to month, and they have to analyze and evaluate for, let's say, January till December, and they see to predict and forecast for future the capacity and demand to meet. Same is the example with the woolen knitwear factory, for example, how it's fluctuating. You can see in summer it's quite coming down, dropping, and then in winter it's increasing quite high. It reached to the highest demand. And then aluminium producer, look, see, is a very different graphical illustration, and that is gradually increasing with the demand. So that's a constant increase. And then you see the retail store fluctuation. Again, it can be number of forces, festivity, or it can be seasonality because of a cultural event, or maybe any other political changes, or fluctuation of economical changes can be the reason in retail store. So you can see they're quite interesting to explain. Each one has a different behavior with the demand fluctuation and capacity. However, reconciling capacity and demand, the 3 important ways we have to either keep the level baseline, and then we have to keep it as constant capacity, and the fluctuation of the demand can be 20, 10, 30% more or less, but the capacity remain constant, and then fluctuation will be managed when we have a off-peak and we have peak timing. The second possible reconciling is chasing the demand. So we don't keep the capacity as it is. We change the capacity as the demand is fluctuating. If the demand is low, we have less resources to be in place. When the demand is increasing, we have to add up resources, and we take more employ or deploy more resources accordingly as per the demand of particular, depend on the business, so we can chase the demand. The third one, the demand management. So we manage the demand, and again, it has to be going with the fluctuation with the demand. Then you can keep the demand constant, and you can only take the orders, and then you can have a backlog, and then you can make it in a sequential order. Then you have to make sure that first come first serve basis, and number of demand can be fulfilled as per the capacity. So let's take more in further explain through this graphical illustration how the demand fluctuate. For example, how do you cope with fluctuation in demand? So if it is the level capacity, we keep the capacity constant, we chase the demand, or we manage the demand. Three possible option. We say the first one, where we can absorb the demand with 10-20% plus minus, so we have enough capacity. If the demand is fluctuating within that limit, so it is possible to manage, absorb the demand, and it will nothing to do with the under or over the capacity that is in place. The adjustment to fluctuate according to the demand fluctuation, then that is the second option, where we have to adjust the output to match the demand. And in the third one, demand management, we have to change the demand, rather to control it and bring it according to the level of resources we have in place as per the capacity, to measure input as well as output to be balanced. So we take example here, the first one, to absorb capacity. What exactly we have excess capacity, and we make to stock sometime and make customers wait. That's possible. We can keep the level of the capacity, and then we manage the demand accordingly. So that is the first option, where we can absorb the demand accordingly. So the output will be measured with the product part finished goods, or customer inventory, or we have to take as excessive in number or keep in stock. If there is a high demand, we still have 10-20% more than required, or if it is a bit less than that, so we can have a queues, or we can backlog. So when the second one, we can think about the adjustment according to the demand. We hire and fire. We increase labor, temporary labor. We take people hourly rate or temporary contract, and then we lay off them, and then we have overtime, short-term contract, and then sometime subcontract or third-party work as outsourcing it. However, in the third one, we keep the demand change. So the change pattern of the demand, where we can develop alternative product, or we can give different option for different product or services to the customer, and that is where we can change the demand. So in the aviation capacity, if we are considering how it is possible, the demand fluctuation within aviation industry, airline, we know that the demand fluctuates as in any other industry, but airports are quite complex. They have a very complex system that can be constrained by number of elements, including terminals capacity, stand capacity, taxiways, runway capacity, airspace. In order to manage this, the scarce resources are very limited. The airlines are allocated. They have one or two runways to manage all the takeoff and landing of the airlines, especially when the airport is very, very busy. So the rate of aircraft movement on the runway or taxiway that result in a given level of delays, for example, we have to think that the high fixed cost mean the airline need to maximize seat occupancy to recover cost and maintain profitability. So therefore, capacity management here includes in the airlines the number of flights they have to operate, types of airline in use in a specific route, fuel requirements, for example, flight crews in rotation, and catering requirement. So long-term capacity planning is important for the airline. The capacity in airline industry is measured by number of seats they are selling for each flight, which basically reflect the size of the aircraft at a wider context, given that airline cannot just change the number of seats in each aircraft easily. So optimizing the load factor per each flight is very, very important. It's quite crucial here. So the long-term scheduling, developing additional capacity, more planes is extremely costly and has a long lead time of multiple years. Reducing capacity also is a problematic area. Planes need to be in active service to recover. The investment is a huge investment in this industry, and again, therefore, long-term scheduling and capacity planning is the only way to balance demand against capacity to ensure maximum seat occupancy and therefore to ensure productivity and profitability. So the availability seat per mile may make the load factor more understandable. So we know the ASM of any airline, they measure how many passenger travel miles are the available at any, for example, given time. So the statistics basically expresses the capacity of the airline. The higher load factor value make the airline more profitable by spreading the fixed cost expenses across more seats and more passengers on aircraft for each flight. So developing the airplane capacity, it is again the aircraft design that is the important design process which is defined how it is going to be balancing to meet, because there's a lot of competition and the demand requirement to produce an aircraft design that is strong, lightweight, economical, and carry adequate you can say payload or per aircraft to fly with safety at the same time. So that's quite complex nature of the operation to develop the capacity along with the demand. So we have to see how to divide the aircraft in different classes, from the premium to business, premium economy to economy, that all seats are filled with different variation in the prices. Again, the Airbus and Boeing, for example, they currently build the biggest passenger airline in the world with a mighty Airbus A380 or 800, and it is basically the rival of the Airbus is Boeing 777 or 777-300, while the Russian aircraft on the same time has a huge capacity. So the aerospace technology basically providing worldwide the ranking that how they increase the inside capacity of the aircraft from, let's say, 300 to 500 people, or up to 800 passengers, or more than 800 passengers in one flight. For example, if the demand is increasing, then how the flight inside the design of the craft has to be, the design process need to be taken in consideration to meet the demand for the capacity for each airline company to make sure that the aircraft is designed according to the fluctuation in the off or peak season, particularly to sell the seats so that the aircraft meet their expenses at the same time. However, the airport demand capacity and that's imbalance. The one of the important, you can see in this graphical illustration, the fleet, the revenue, the airport itself. It's for example, the baggage handling, airport conditioning, lounge, of the customer care, catering on the flight, for example, the flight operation itself, sales and marketing, the cargo and fleet. They all are very important elements within the structure of the airline to meet the demand and then balance the at the same time the capacity. If the capacity is imbalance, the aircraft demand for imbalance capacity would be really have the revenue issue that gonna lost, and that will be a serious disaster for the business. And then there's an ongoing cost which is high, and then if the number of components that is imbalanced with the capacity, that will be a serious blow to the aircraft company or the airline company to losing its revenue. Delays again in a number of ways increase the service cost, and then poor passenger experience, missed connection, and reduce public confidence can be some of the quite alarming reasons for the imbalance between the demand and the capacity of any airline company. So the demand capacity balance is another important business model as a solution to provide the airport with rolling, for example, predictive. You can see that DCB as a demand capacity balance is an advanced operational planning solution that can enhance or provide a tool for the processes to meet the demand for flight scheduling, live operation, historic performance, airport resources, if there is any constraint to avoid delays, and then increase the service cost can be managed at the same time, or revenue lost can be managed. So we need to balance the capacity as per the demand and fill the seats, and that can also be possible that we have to provide the best experience and they get the customer, they are satisfied, and there is no missed connection, rather to build the confidence of public in the aircraft to enhance the revenue. And then again we have to take all these important components in consideration for the airport demand capacity imbalance. So the aviation, both airline and the airport, they have to be taking a number of important measures to do input and output measure of the capacity at the same time. So the capacity imbalance, we can see the large scale data processing and big data analytics can lead to insight into demand forecasting, can be one of the important helpful source for ensuring to match the capacity as per the demand for data analytics. Development of accurate modeling and simulations is very helpful tool. Performance optimization using existing facilities to get the best out of the resources or the capacity that is in place to make the optimum use of rather the capacity. Efficient infrastructure expansion to avoid excess capital expenditure, because if there is a huge infrastructure without utilization, is going to be another huge cost for the organization with not generating any revenue. This is collectively known as DACM, Digital Airport Capacity Management, through technology innovation, and that can provide a number of benefits to the airport management to make the best use of measuring the capacity to balance the demand and balance the capacity according to the demand fluctuation. So limitation to capacity increases with demand expected to increase yearly for the foreseeable future. There are hard limits to the amount that capacity for airline can be increased, and you can see this limitation tend to be rooted in infrastructure, increasing flight number causing significant congestion for the airport, where maximum the throughput cannot be increased without massive rebuilding efforts. And that means greater seat configuration also throw up issues of luggage and other item with fixed limitation. So we have to be more careful with the limitation to capacity increase with a number of seats per aircraft, and instead of providing more or less leg space or having more passenger on board, how that demand can meet and have the best experience for passenger point of view for their satisfaction. And then if we apply the product design for getting different, for example, passengers, they take their luggage, how much time they spend to avoid the delays. So we have to see the possible alternative for the layout design and how the airport can manage to provide the best experience for the passengers. So the one of the limitation to capacity increase that can be increased is the demand is rapidly outstripping the capacity for Eurocontrol estimate, for example, that the current European aviation network will be unable to cope by, let's say, 2040. So the demand is quite high. It's still increasing, though during the COVID and the current lockdown, we know the aviation industry or tourism, they all are standby and there's no much going on. But it was predicted earlier, and this is still the prediction that in future the demand will be increasing and there will be high demand for the passengers or for the flights. So the increasing the flight with the demand increasing, it is predicted again by 2040 the current capacity of the airports in Europe, for example, through Eurocontrol, they estimate that the European aviation network will be not able to cope with the demand by 2040. So the current delays can be attributed to capacity of the staffing issues, which is already 45%, disruptive event that strikes 28%, and dangerous weathers is up to 27%. They are some of the key limitation to the if you want to increase the capacity. However, the other limitation include, according to Eurocontrol forecast, that 2040 there will be a 53% increase in demand, potentially rising to 84%. That's the prediction. This will likely lead to 16 airports running at maximum capacity on a daily basis, and therefore highly congested. Currently 6 airports, they already they listed them, and as a result of the expected delays are increased already 500, which affecting all parts of the aviation network. Now, the climate change and the capacity reduction at the same time with the pollution, with the noise. So climate change is projected to reduce carrying capacity and redistribute the different for example, ecosystem. The climate system change directly result in the ecosystem change that affecting the economy and society and the whole human system, rather, just as the land and the water resources, climate resources have limited capacity to carry population, economy, society, and other factors within certain time and space. So from capacity management, we are looking to demand and at the same time capacity with the demand fluctuation, and take the example aviation industry with the airport, airlines would increase to meet the demand of the people they are flying around. So take the example of any other industry. There is high demand for, let's say, automobile, hotel management, restaurants. So when we balance with the climate, the change from the climate, because there is a capacity either limitation we have to increase, and then reduction in the capacity, again we need to see what is the impact with the climate change. So carrying out the capacity with the climate resources, we have a limited capacity to carry, let's say, population, economy, society, and other factors which has direct impact within a certain time and space on the ecosystem or the changes we have in the climate. So just looking to the next slide, we have to overview the climate changes. Is climate change happening already? We can see the answer is yes. That's the short answer. Long answer still yes, because the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, they already the IPCC finds rise in global temperature and rise in the sea level and very broad consensus again amongst the scientific community, for example. And you can see this graphical illustration how the climate is changing, and you can see the temperature increasing. So according to the IPCC that consists of governmental representative, for example, the 1,000 plus leading scientists within climate science, that how things are changing with the climate, and how it is damaging rather the land and the ecosystem or the eco-friendly environment or atmosphere that is more friendly for human being. So the climate change, when we see the overview here, this graphical illustration, you can see how things are keep changing. If we go from 200 years, not go very previous history, so we know that particularly from 1961 to 1990, that is one of the big change here happening, and you can see that the dreadful error bars here from 5 to 95%, that's quite a huge change with the error bars. And we can also see, if you look into different periods and then the rate for every 10 years, how they are fluctuating. And if you can also see the temperature, how it is increasing. And then you can see from between 1860 to 2000, within this 200 or maybe 150 years time, how it is fluctuating from where temperature was and where it is now. So that is quite a constant or increasing change with the climate. And we take the example of the climate change again with the aviation industry. And according to IPCC estimate that currently the global aviation industry contributes approximately 3.5% of all anthropogenic climate change impact. This is likely to rapidly rise to between maybe 5 to 15% by 2050 at the current rates if no action is taken. So that's why it's important that some serious consideration need to be taken, and carrying the capacity or the maximum number of individuals that an environment can sustain over time without destroying or degrading the environment is determined by, of course, a few key factors. For example, food availability, water, and space. So we need to be more careful that in the future the Earth's climate is, of course, changing. The more greenhouses gases we emit, the larger future climate change will be, and this percentage is likely to rise even further if other industries reduce their climate impact. So operational efficiencies such as cleaner fuel have had almost no impact, as any impact reduction are quickly overtaken by rising passenger numbers, let's say in the context of aviation industry. So human activities like driving, manufacturing, electricity generation, and the clearing of the, for example, forests, and this all contributing to the greenhouse gas emission and warm the planet. So we need to think about every flight, every passenger. So this is all contributing to the climate change. So what is the future development then? We have to think for the greener, eco-friendly. That is the future. We all want to get the best out of our operations and different businesses. Two major causes and solution to examine. Gaia capitalism and the radical restructuring to provide the solution for the climate changes for the future, to have more eco-friendly Earth. So we say Gaia capitalism. This is the approach. Basically, the mainstream perception that climate change is largely caused by the excessive use of different activities that are already we are practicing. So climate change describes a change in the average condition, such as the temperature and rainfall. So in a region over long period of time. For example, take the example of scientists in NASA. They have observed that Earth's surface is warming, and many of the warmest year on record have happened in the past 20 years. So we need to think about the solution is therefore to minimize the excessive use of more efficient and environmentally friendly or environmental friendly technology, minimization of the waste, etc., and then change in public and state attitude toward the environment issue can reduce harmful impact on human behavior. Gaia capitalism was basically coined or introduced by Richard Branson from the Virgin Group of Companies. They pledged to donate $3 billion to environmentally sustainable technology and at the same time business practices. The attempts is to harness the innovative or you can say innovate power of free market to develop vital technology. Profit motive seen as critical, for example, of this developing thought is carbon emission trading market, making lower emissions in theory and profitability. So the power plant, so the US, for example, carbon dioxide emission initiative, transportation, for example, aviation industry, the people and goods, farming, deforestation, fertilizers, oil and drilling, natural gas drilling. The number of important causes of the global warming is due to, let's say, volcanic eruption, the permafrost, the fertilizers, deforestation. They all are the causes of the warming. So we have to be more careful with some initiative to invest to get the environmental more sustainable, more friendly, the technology and all the operations, different activities to be performed without much excessive practices. And that is the example that we have to develop a carbon emission trading market is one of the early example which has been introduced, making lower emission in theory for profitability at the same time to have the Gaia capitalism approach. However, Warner research article is interesting to read. This is already uploaded in the Week 10 your workshop folder. The paper is basically presenting the geophysicist Brad Warner. It was published through 2012, which in this article he argues that the conventional action against climate change, such as Gaia capitalism, can only delay severe environmental damage at the best. So this is supported by other experts or scientists such as Anderson and Bose, who argue that the economic growth in the short term is directly incompatible with the pledge to restrict warming rise to let's say below 2 degrees centigrade. So solution is direct action activism and resistance movement instead of cost benefit analysis based on the environmental or the environmental management approach. This changes everything for everyone. For example, the NOMI basically identifies in the article, if you look into the Week 10 folder, you will find how this article changes everything. Root causes of the environmental changes indicates that not in human excess, but rather than very logical of capitalism itself can be the cause for climate change. This is resulting in a very different understanding, because radical system change is required rather than shift in public and sustained attitude to relatively narrow range of issues. And this is the need for the change that must occur in consumption habit, international trade level, economic goals, global wealth distribution, and democratic participation. There's some of the suggestion and consideration which are very important to take, that the world energy, how it is consumed by different source of energies. So the change in this article about everything shows the logic of capitalism, which is built upon cycles of ever increasing consumption economic growth. The internal cycle is compatible with sustainable habitation. Consumption level need to be actively reduced rather than redirect to the green capitalism. National economic growth as a policy goal must be eliminated. Global trade must be massively reduced as economically effective but ecologically quite destructive. So Nomi Klein identifies an immediate reduction of 8% to 10% in all emission amongst wealthy nation as a necessary minimum certain to need a radical overhaul of the existing global economic system. So that is the advice which you can continue sharing your thoughts and ideas for the capacity management, the demand in the different industries, including aviation, and then what is the excessive use of different operational activities on the impact on the climate and the climate change with different approaches to provide the right solution. Read the article on the hospital capacity management and solution. That's online article with the hyperlink provided in the discussion forum of the week 11. Share your thoughts and ideas in week 11 discussion forum. Read the chapter for capacity management and your core book. You can read the chapter from Slag or Hazard, a recommended book. And we will continue our discussion in the next session about project management.